That means yes. Mason looked back at Elena, and something in his expression shifted. You want to get lunch? I know a place. Elena checked her phone. 12:15. Catherine wasn't expecting her back until 2. I should get back to Sophie. Catherine texted me 20 minutes ago. They're making a second batch of cookies and Sophie wants to decorate them. We've got time. She should say no. Should maintain professional boundaries, keep distance between her personal life and this potential job. But Mason was looking at her like she was a real person, not a charity case, and Elena realized she wanted to have lunch with him. Okay, but somewhere cheap. I'm buying. You're not buying. Then I'm not going, Mason sighed. Fine. You can buy. But we're going to Lou Mitchell's, and you're getting the pie. Lou Mitchell's was a diner, not as old or worn as the Golden Lantern, but same basic concept. Vinyl booze, huge portions, waitresses who called everyone honey. They slid into a booth near the back, and Mason ordered coffee while Elena studied the menu with an eye on prices. Get whatever you want, Mason said. The pot roast is incredible. I'm getting a sandwich. Elena, I have $47 in my bank account, Mason. I'm getting a sandwich. He was quiet for a moment, then flagged down the waitress. 2 pot roasts, extra vegetables, and save room for pie. We'll order that after. Elena wanted to argue, but the waitress was already gone, and she was too tired to fight. You're very pushy. You've mentioned that. Mason dumped sugar in his coffee, 3 packets, which seemed excessive. How are you really doing? At the hotel? With everything? Honestly, I feel like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. Elena wrapped her hands around her water glass. This is too good to be real. Any minute now, someone's going to realize they made a mistake and take it all away. That's not going to happen. You can't know that. I can, actually, because I'm the one making it happen, and I don't make mistakes. He said it matter-of-factly, without arrogance. You're not a charity case, Elena. You're someone who got dealt a bad hand and needed a reset. That's all this is. A reset. The food arrived. Massive plates of pot roast, mashed potatoes, and carrots that steamed in the cold air. Elena's stomach growled embarrassingly loud. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the kind that felt earned rather than awkward. The restaurant filled up around them. Lunch rush, business people and tourists and families. Normal life happening all around them while Elena tried to remember what normal felt like. Can I ask you something? Mason set down his fork. What made you come to Chicago? Milwaukee isn't that far. Why not stay there where you had connections? Elena swallowed her bite carefully. Marcus's family is in Milwaukee. After he died, they made it very clear they blamed me for how things turned out. Said if I'd been a better wife, he would have been more careful, would have had insurance, wouldn't have been working that job in the first place. The words tasted bitter even 2 years later. His mother tried to take Sophie from me, said I was unfit. I left before she could make good on the threat. Mason's expression darkened. That's unbelievable. That's grief. People need someone to blame, and I was convenient. Elena pushed potatoes around her plate. I thought Chicago would be better. Bigger city, more opportunities. Turns out being homeless in Chicago is just as hard as being homeless anywhere else. You're not homeless anymore. I'm living in a hotel room you're paying for. That's basically the same thing. It's not even close to the same thing. Mason leaned forward. You have a roof over your head, food, safety. Sophie's warm and fed and playing with my kid right now instead of being scared. That matters, Elena. Don't diminish it. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the same exhaustion she felt mirrored back. The same bone-deep weariness that came from carrying too much for too long. You lost your wife. I lost my husband. We both know what it's like to have everything fall apart. So why are you okay and I'm not? Who says I'm okay? Mason's laugh was hollow. I run a billion-dollar company, and most days I can barely get out of bed. I have a kid who needs me, and I feel like I'm failing him constantly. The only reason I'm functional at all is because I have resources, money, staff, my mother-in-law, who basically raised Liam while I was useless. You've been doing this alone with nothing. The fact that you're still standing is pretty incredible. Elena's throat tightened. I don't feel incredible. I feel like I'm barely holding on. Yeah, I know the feeling. They finished their meal in silence again, but this time it felt heavier, weighted with shared understanding that didn't need words.
When the waitress brought pie, apple for Elena, cherry for Mason, both slices enormous, they picked at it half-heartedly.
My wife wanted more kids, Mason said suddenly. We'd been trying for 2 years when she got diagnosed, and I remember thinking after she died that at least we only had Liam, that it would be easier with just one kid to explain it to. He set down his fork. But lately, I've been thinking maybe she was right. Maybe Liam needs siblings, someone to share the weight with. You thinking about dating again? No?
The answer came fast, definitive. I can't imagine being with someone who isn't Sarah, but adoption, maybe, or fostering. He looked up, met her eyes. Does that sound crazy? It sounds lonely, Elena said quietly, trying to fill a void with something that's not what you actually want. Mason flinched. Harsh, but fair. I'm sorry, that came out wrong. No, you're right. It's just hard to admit I might be stuck like this, that maybe I won't ever want to move on. He pushed his pie around. What about you? You ever think about dating? With what time? What energy? Elena shook her head. Besides, who wants a broke single mother with trust issues? Someone with sense, hopefully. You're a catch, Elena, she snorted. Right, I'm killing it right now. I'm serious. You're smart, resilient, a great mother. Any guy would be lucky.
Says the billionaire who feels sorry for me. I don't feel sorry for you. Mason's voice went sharp. I respect you. There's a difference. Elena studied his face, looking for the lie, but found only sincerity. It unsettled her more than pity would have. I don't know what to do with that. You don't have to do anything with it. Just accept it. Mason signaled for the check. And before you argue, I'm paying. You can get it next time. There's going to be a next time? Why wouldn't there be? Liam's already asking when he can see Sophie again. Catherine's planning a play date. You're stuck with us now. The waitress brought the check, and true to his word, Mason paid before Elena could reach for her purse. They walked out into afternoon sun that felt too bright after the dim restaurant, squinting against the glare. Thank you for lunch, Elena said. And for the interview. And for everything else. I keep saying that, don't I? You're allowed to be grateful. Just don't let it make you feel like you owe me something. Mason pulled out his phone, typed something. I'm sending a car to take you back to the hotel, and before you protest, it's on my way, and it's freezing out. Elena's phone buzzed with the car notification. She was learning to pick her battles with him. Fine, but I'm walking next time. Deal? The car arrived moments later, and Mason held the door for her like she was someone important, like she mattered. Elena settled into the back seat, looked back at him standing on the sidewalk. Mason? Yeah? Your wife was lucky to have you. Something flickered across his face, pain, maybe, or regret. I wasn't always this version of myself. The good parts came from her. I'm just trying to live up to what she would have wanted. The door closed before Elena could respond, and the car pulled away, leaving Mason on the sidewalk getting smaller in the rearview mirror. Elena watched until he disappeared, then leaned back against the seat and let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Her phone rang. Catherine. How'd the interview go? I think it went well. Mason said Jennifer liked me. Jennifer's the key. If she liked you, you're in. Catherine's voice was warm with certainty. We're at my house now. Sophie's having the time of her life. You should see these cookies, architectural marvels of frosting and sprinkles. I'm on my way back now. Actually, would you mind coming here instead? The girls are asking for a tea party, and I could use another adult to help wrangle them. Elena blinked. Girls plural? Liam invited his friend Emma from school. It's turned into quite the production. Catherine laughed. No pressure, but if you're free, we'd love to have you. 20 minutes later, Elena was standing in Catherine's kitchen watching 3 children, Sophie, young Liam, and a girl with braids who must be Emma, set up an elaborate tea party with actual china. Catherine had put out cookies, finger sandwiches, and what appeared to be actual tea in a proper pot. Mommy! Sophie ran over, tackling Elena's legs. Look what we made! Grandma Catherine taught us how to make royal icing. Grandma Catherine. The title hit Elena sideways. Sophie had never known her grandmothers. Both had died before she was born. Hearing her use it so casually, so naturally, made Elena's chest ache. Catherine caught her eye over Sophie's head, raised an eyebrow in question.
Elena managed to smile, nodded that it was okay. What else could she do?
The tea party was elaborate and chaotic and more fun than Elena had had in years. The kids insisted the adults participate, which meant Elena ended up sitting on the floor in her interview clothes, holding a teacup with her pinky out, while Sophie poured imaginary tea and Liam explained the rules of proper tea party etiquette with the seriousness of a protocol officer. Mason arrived sometime in the middle of the third course. The kids had decided there needed to be multiple courses and stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene with an expression Elena couldn't quite read. "Did I miss the invitation?" "Daddy!" Liam jumped up. "You have to join us. We're having a proper English tea party." "I can see that." Mason caught Elena's eye, smiled. "Guess I'm overdressed." He sat down next to Elena, accepted a teacup from Emma, and played along with a patience that suggested this was normal for him. The kids giggled, poured more imaginary tea, debated whether crumpets were the same as English muffins. Catherine watched from the kitchen with a soft smile, occasionally refilling the cookie plate or bringing more sandwiches. This was her element: family chaos, children laughing, people together. Elena wondered how often she got to experience it since Sarah died. How often this house felt full. By 5 o'clock, the kids were crashing from sugar, sprawled on the living room floor watching a movie. Mason and Elena ended up at the kitchen table while Catherine prepared dinner. She'd insisted they stay, wouldn't take no for an answer. "This is nice," Mason said quietly. "The house feeling alive again." Catherine mentioned it's usually just you three. "Yeah, Sarah had a brother, but he's overseas, military. Catherine doesn't have much other family." He watched his son through the doorway. "I think she's been lonely. She hides it well, but I can tell. Sophie called her grandma." "I heard. Is that okay?" Elena considered. "I think so. She needs that. Someone steady and loving who isn't me." "You're steady and loving." "I'm trying to be. Most days I feel like I'm faking it." "That's what being a parent is," Catherine said from the stove. "Faking it until they're old enough to realize you have no idea what you're doing. By then, hopefully, they love you too much to care." They all laughed, and it felt good. Natural. Like this was something they did regularly instead of a strange convergence of broken families trying to fit together. Dinner was pot roast, apparently Catherine's signature dish, and the kids ate at the coffee table in front of the TV while the adults sat at the dining room table. Mason opened a bottle of wine, poured glasses for Elena and Catherine despite Elena's weak protest. "To new beginnings," Catherine said, raising her glass, "and to finding family in unexpected places." They drank to that, and Elena felt the warmth of the wine spread through her chest. Or maybe it was just the warmth of being here, in this house, with these people who'd somehow decided she was worth their time. After dinner, Sophie fell asleep on Catherine's couch, and Elena couldn't bring herself to wake her. She looked so peaceful, so content, like a kid who wasn't carrying the weight of her mother's mistakes. "Leave her," Catherine suggested. "You both can stay in the guest room. I have plenty of space." "I couldn't—" "Elena." Catherine's voice was gentle but firm. "It's late. Sophie's asleep. And you've had a long day. Stay. Please." So she did. Let Catherine show her to a guest room that was bigger than the hotel room, with a bed that could fit 3 people and an attached bathroom with actual towels instead of hotel ones. Sophie barely stirred when Elena carried her upstairs, just mumbled something and curled into the pillows. Elena stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching her daughter sleep in a real bed in a real house with people who cared about them downstairs. It felt like a dream, the kind she'd wake up from and find herself back in the car, shivering and scared. "She's out cold." Mason appeared beside her, voice low. "Liam's the same way. Sugar crash. Thank you for today. The interview, lunch, this, all of it. Stop thanking me." "I can't seem to help it." They stood there in comfortable silence, 2 parents watching their kids sleep, until Mason spoke again. "You're going to get the job. I know Jennifer, and she doesn't give false hope, so you need to start thinking about permanent housing. The hotel is fine for now, but you'll need something more stable. I've been looking at apartments. Most require first month, last month, and security deposit. Even with a job, I won't have that kind of money for weeks. What if you didn't have to wait?" Mason turned to face her. "Catherine has a rental property about 10 minutes from here. 2-bedroom, good school district. The tenant just moved out. She's been planning to renovate before relisting, but it's livable as is. Elena's stomach dropped. Mason, I can't. Market rate. Catherine charges fair rent, not favors. And yes, you'd have to come up with deposit eventually, but she'd let you move in first and pay it in installments once you're working. It's good business. Better to have a reliable tenant than an empty property. This is too much. It's practical. Sophie needs stability. You need to be near good schools in your job. This solves multiple problems. He paused. At least look at it before you say no. Elena wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain her independence, prove she could do this without their help. But she thought about Sophie sleeping peacefully in a real bed, about the way her daughter had laughed today, about the possibility of giving her a real home instead of hotel rooms and temporary shelters. Okay, she said quietly. I'll look at it. Mason's smile was relieved. Good, we can go tomorrow if you want. Catherine has the keys. Downstairs, Catherine was cleaning up the kitchen, humming something that might have been a Christmas carol. Mason went to help her, and Elena stood in the hallway, caught between floors, between her old life and whatever this new one was becoming. Her phone buzzed. An email from Jennifer Torres. Thank you for interviewing today. We'd like to extend an offer for the corporate hospitality coordinator position. Please see attached details. Welcome to Reed Technologies. Elena read the email 3 times, then sat down hard on the stairs. She'd gotten the job. She actually had a job. Benefits, salary, stability, a future that wasn't just survival. The tears came before she could stop them, big gulping sobs that she tried to muffle into her hands. Downstairs, the murmur of voices stopped. Elena? Catherine appeared at the bottom of the stairs. Sweetheart, what's wrong? Elena held up her phone, couldn't find words. Catherine took it, read the email, and her face broke into a brilliant smile. Mason, get up here. He appeared seconds later, took the phone Catherine handed him, and his expression softened. Congratulations. I got the job. Elena's voice came out shaky. I actually got the job. Of course you did. Catherine sat beside her on the stairs, pulled her into a hug. I told you Jennifer doesn't give false hope. Mason sat on her other side, and for a moment Elena was flanked by these 2 people who'd known her less than a week, but had somehow decided she mattered. It should have felt intrusive. Instead, it felt like safety. What's the salary? Mason asked. Elena found the attachment, read the number, and felt fresh tears start. $65,000 a year. More money than she'd made in her entire life. More money than she'd thought possible. That's good, Mason said. That's really good. It's incredible. Elena wiped her eyes. I don't know what to say. Say you'll start next Monday, Catherine suggested. Say you'll let us take you apartment hunting tomorrow. Say you'll let yourself be happy for 5 minutes. Elena laughed through the tears. Okay, yes to all of that. They sat on the stairs together, an unlikely trio, until the clock in the hall chimed 9. Upstairs, Sophie slept peacefully. Outside, Chicago sparkled with lights. And Elena Hart, for the first time in 2 years, let herself believe that maybe everything would be okay. She didn't know about the struggles ahead, the adjustment to office life, the moments she'd doubt herself. The day's grief would hit her sideways and make everything feel impossible. She didn't know that Mason would become more than just a benefactor, that Catherine would become the mother figure she'd never had, that Sophie and young Liam would become inseparable. She didn't know that in 6 months she'd be thriving at Reed Technologies, that in a year she'd be leading her own team, that the apartment Catherine showed her tomorrow would become a real home, filled with laughter and art projects and the kind of ordinary chaos that meant family. She didn't know that she and Mason would spend countless evenings talking after the kids went to bed, sharing their grief, and slowly, carefully learning to live again. That friendship would deepen into something neither of them expected, something that felt like coming home. But she'd find out, starting tomorrow, starting with hope. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that had seen better decades, but it had working heat and windows that locked and a landlord who wasn't a stranger doing charity. Elena stood in the empty living room on a Saturday morning in January, watching Sophie run from room to room with the kind of excitement that made Elena's chest ache. This one's mine, Sophie called from the smaller bedroom. Can I paint it purple? Catherine, who'd driven them over with a trunk full of cleaning supplies, appeared in the doorway. Let's start with clean walls and work our way up to purple. Elena walked through the space slowly, cataloging what they'd need: furniture, dishes, towels, all the mundane things that made a place livable. The hotel had spoiled them with its conveniences, but this was real. This was theirs. What do you think? Catherine asked, joining her by the window that overlooked a small courtyard. I think it's perfect. Elena's voice came out thick. I think I can't believe this is happening. Believe it. You start work Monday, first paycheck comes in 2 weeks, and this place is yours as long as you want it. Catherine squeezed her shoulder. Marcus, my Marcus, not yours. And I lived in a place like this when Sarah was little. Best years of our lives. It's not about the size, Elena. It's about what you build inside it. They spent the day cleaning, scrubbing floors, wiping down cabinets, washing windows until they sparkled. Sophie helped with the enthusiasm of a 6-year-old, which meant she mostly spread dirt around while singing off-key. By 3 o'clock, the place smelled like lemon cleaner and possibility. Mason showed up at 4 with young Liam in a pickup truck full of furniture. Don't ask where I got it. Catherine made calls. The furniture was decent, a couch that had been reupholstered, a kitchen table with mismatched chairs, beds for both bedrooms that Catherine swore had been thoroughly cleaned. Nothing matched, everything was secondhand, and Elena had never loved anything more in her life. The beds are from the foundation, Catherine explained, directing Mason and Liam where to put the larger pieces. We keep a stock for families transitioning to stable housing. The couch is from my neighbor who just redecorated. The table was in my basement collecting dust. I can't just take all this. You're not taking it. You're using it. There's a difference. Catherine handed her a box of dishes. These were Sarah's, from her first apartment. I've been holding on to them for years, waiting for the right person. I think she'd want Sophie to have them. Elena looked at the simple white plates, the mismatched mugs, and felt tears threatening again. She'd been crying a lot lately. Happy tears, grateful tears, overwhelmed tears. Marcus used to tease her about being emotional. She wondered what he'd think of her now, accepting handouts from strangers, letting other people rebuild her life. Probably he'd tell her to stop being proud and just accept the help. By 6, the apartment looked almost livable. Sophie and young Liam had claimed the smaller bedroom as a fort, building elaborate structures out of moving boxes. Mason and Elena sat on the floor in the living room, backs against the new old couch, while Catherine made a supply list in the kitchen. First night in a new place, Mason said. That's always weird. Is it terrible that I'm scared? Elena pulled her knees to her chest. Like I'm waiting for someone to take it away? Not terrible. Understandable. He shifted to face her. But no one's taking this away. You earned it. The job, the apartment, all of it. You did the interview. You impressed Jennifer and Marcus. You got hired on merit. This isn't charity. It feels like charity. That's your pride talking. Learn to tell it to shut up. Mason's smile took the edge off. I had to learn that after Sarah died. Everyone wanted to help. And I kept refusing because I thought accepting help meant I was failing. Catherine finally sat me down and told me that letting people help wasn't weakness. It was giving them purpose, letting them feel useful when everything felt useless. Elena looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the same exhaustion she felt, the same barely healed wounds. Does it get easier? The guilt of still being here when they're not? Some days, Mason's voice went quiet. Some days I can go hours without thinking about her. Other days I can't breathe from missing her. There's no pattern to it, no timeline, just days you survive and days you don't. Which kind is today? Surviving, barely. He leaned his head back against the couch. She would have loved this, helping you get set up. Sarah was always collecting people, finding ways to fix things. I think that's why I'm drawn to it now. Like if I help enough people, maybe I can make up for the fact that I couldn't help her. Elena reached over, took his hand. It felt natural, that small connection. You can't save everyone. I know, doesn't stop me from trying. They sat like that, hands linked, while Catherine puttered in the kitchen and the kids destroyed the bedroom with their fort building. It should have felt strange, this intimacy with someone she'd known less than 2 weeks. But it didn't. It felt like finding someone who spoke the same language of grief. Catherine appeared with her supply list and stopped short, seeing them. Something flickered across her face. surprise maybe, or hope, but she smoothed it away quickly. I'm going to run to Target for basics: sheets, towels, toilet paper, kitchen stuff. You two want to come or stay here with the kids? We'll stay, Mason said. Someone needs to make sure they don't burn the place down. After Catherine left, Mason ordered pizza while Elena unpacked the box of dishes. The kids emerged from their fort, hungry and wild-eyed, and they all ate sitting on the living room floor because the kitchen table wasn't assembled yet. This is like camping, Sophie said through a mouthful of pepperoni. But inside. Indoor camping, young Liam agreed. We should make a fire. Absolutely not, Mason and Elena said in unison, then laughed. After dinner, they assembled furniture while the kids watched a movie on Mason's tablet. It was awkward and frustrating. The instructions were in Swedish or possibly gibberish, but eventually they got the table standing and the bed frames together. Mason was surprisingly bad at following directions, which made Elena feel better about her own confusion. I run a tech company, he muttered, staring at a pile of screws. I have people for this. Well, your people aren't here, so figure it out. Bossy. Practical. They got the beds made just as Catherine returned with enough supplies to stock a small store. Sheets, blankets, pillows, towels in colors Sophie had picked out online, kitchen essentials that Elena insisted she'd pay back over time. Catherine waved her off, but accepted an IOU that Elena wrote on a napkin and signed formally. By 9, Sophie was asleep in her new purpleless bedroom, and young Liam had crashed on the couch. Mason carried his son to the car, while Catherine gave Elena one last hug. You're going to do great on Monday, Catherine whispered, and if you need anything at all, you call me, day or night. Thank you for everything. Stop thanking me and start living, sweetheart. That's all the thanks I need. After they left, Elena walked through her apartment, her actual apartment, turning off lights, checking locks, making sure everything was real. In Sophie's room, her daughter slept curled around the polar bear from Christmas, her new sheets pulled up to her chin. The room smelled like clean laundry and new beginnings. Elena's own room was sparse, just a bed and a lamp Catherine had included, but it was hers. She lay down on sheets that didn't belong to a hotel, in a space that wasn't temporary, and let herself cry one more time. Relief, fear, gratitude, grief, all of it mixed together until she couldn't tell which emotion was which. Her phone buzzed. Mason, you okay? Elena, yeah, just overwhelmed. Mason, good overwhelmed or bad overwhelmed? Elena, both, mostly good. Mason, that's normal. First night anywhere new is weird. Call if you need anything. She almost did call just to hear another adult voice in the silence. Instead, she turned off the light and listened to the sounds of her apartment, the radiator clanking, the neighbor's TV through the wall, the familiar, unfamiliar noises of a building settling. Eventually, exhaustion pulled her under. Monday morning came too fast. Elena woke at 5, couldn't fall back asleep, and spent an hour picking out an outfit that screamed professional competence. Sophie woke up excited, her first day at the on-site childcare at Reed Technologies, and chattered nonstop through breakfast about whether there'd be other kids and if they'd have good toys. Catherine picked them up at 7:30, insisted on driving them both for the first day. The childcare center was on the second floor of Reed Tech, bright and clean with teachers who seemed genuinely happy to meet Sophie. Elena filled out paperwork with shaking hands while Sophie explored the reading corner. She'll be fine, the lead teacher, Michelle, young and kind, assured her. We've got a great group of kids her age. She'll make friends in no time. Elena kissed Sophie goodbye 3 times, promised to check in at lunch, and forced herself to walk away, even as her daughter waved cheerfully. In the elevator heading up to 32, she tried to calm her racing heart. First day, new job. She could do this. Jennifer Torres met her in the lobby with a warm smile and a coffee. Welcome to your first day. Ready to jump in? As ready as I'll ever be. The orientation was thorough. HR paperwork, benefits enrollment, office tour, introductions to what felt like 50 people whose names Elena immediately forgot. Her desk was in an open office area with 5 other coordinators, all women, all friendly in that professional way that could be genuine or performative. Elena couldn't tell yet. Marcus Webb, her supervisor, not her dead husband, stopped by around 10 with a stack of files. These are your first 3 events. Board dinner next month, client visit from Japan in February, and a company retreat in March. Start with the board dinner. It's the smallest. Elena opened the first file, saw the budget, $15,000 for dinner for 20 people, and tried not to panic. This is considered small? Wait until you see the retreat budget.
Marcus's smile was wry. You'll be fine. Jennifer says you have hotel experience, so you know how to wrangle vendors and manage logistics. This is just that with more money and pickier clients.
He left her with the files and a login to the company's event management software. Elena spent the next 4 hours trying to figure out the system, reviewing past events for reference, and making preliminary notes about the board dinner. It was overwhelming, but in a good way, the kind of challenge that made her brain work instead of just surviving. Lunch came and she checked on Sophie, who was covered in paint and ecstatic about her new friend Emma. The same Emma from the tea party. Apparently their friendship had been fate. She doesn't want to leave, Michelle said, amused. I think you've got a regular on your hands. Elena returned to her desk feeling lighter. Sophie was happy. She was employed. They had an apartment. Things were actually, impossibly, working out. The afternoon brought her first crisis. The venue for the board dinner had double booked and was trying to back out. Elena spent 2 hours on the phone, negotiating and problem solving, and eventually securing a better venue for the same price. When she hung up, she found Jennifer standing at her desk. Heard you handled the Regency situation. They weren't being reasonable, so I found somewhere better. Good instincts. Jennifer perched on the edge of the desk. How's your first day going? Honestly, I'm terrified I'm going to screw something up. You will. Everyone does. The question is whether you fix it or fall apart. Jennifer's expression softened. For what it's worth, I think you're going to be great at this. You've got that thing, that ability to stay calm when everything's on fire. It's rare. Elena thought about the last 6 months, the car, the shelters, the constant low-level panic of not knowing where they'd sleep or what they'd eat. I've had practice staying calm during fires. I know. I read your file. Jennifer stood. That's why I hired you. Not because Mason asked, though he did, but because someone who's survived what you've survived and still shows up, that's the kind of person I want on my team. After Jennifer left, Elena sat at her desk feeling something unfamiliar, pride. She was good at this. She'd forgotten during all the chaos that she had skills, that she was more than just a struggling single mother, that she could be competent and professional and valuable. The rest of the week followed the same pattern. Early mornings with Sophie, long days coordinating events, late afternoons picking up her daughter who was always reluctant to leave. Elena fell into bed exhausted every night, but woke up with purpose every morning. It felt good. It felt normal. On Friday, Mason stopped by her desk at 4. How was week 1? Survived. Barely. That's the spirit. He handed her an envelope. Paycheck. Direct deposit starts next pay period, but Jennifer thought you might want this one in hand. Elena opened it, saw the amount, and felt tears sting. 2 weeks' pay. More money than she'd seen in months. Enough to start paying Catherine back, to buy groceries without counting pennies, to breathe. Thank you, she managed. You earned it. Mason's phone buzzed. I've got a meeting, but there's a thing tonight if you're interested. Jennifer's team does happy hour on Fridays. Low key, just drinks and decompression. You should come. I don't know. Sophie's invited too. We're doing it at Catherine's. The kids can play while the adults pretend to be social. He was already walking backward toward the elevator. 7 o'clock. Be there. He was gone before Elena could argue. At 7, she found herself on Catherine's doorstep with Sophie, who immediately ran inside when young Liam opened the door. The house was full of people. Jennifer, Marcus, Liam, Chen, a few other co-workers Elena recognized but couldn't name. Catherine had made enough food for an army. Elena? Jennifer waved her over. Come meet everyone properly, without the stress of orientation. The evening was easy in a way Elena hadn't expected. The team was tight-knit but welcoming, sharing war stories about difficult clients and disastrous events with the kind of dark humor that came from shared experience. Elena found herself laughing, contributing stories from her hotel days, feeling like she belonged. Mason stayed mostly quiet, nursing a beer and watching the group with something like satisfaction. At one point, he caught Elena's eye across the room and smiled, and she felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with gratitude. No, she shut that down immediately. Mason was her boss's boss, her benefactor, the person who'd saved her when she had nothing. Feeling anything beyond friendship was inappropriate and stupid and asking for heartbreak. But when he came over later, sat beside her on Catherine's couch, while the kids ran wild in the backyard, that flutter came back. "You did good this week," he said quietly. "Jennifer's impressed." "Jennifer's easy to impress." "She's really not." Mason shifted to face her. "I'm proud of you. I know that's weird to say, but I am. You could have given up 100 times, and you didn't. I had Sophie. Giving up wasn't an option. Still, you're stronger than you think." Elena looked at him, at the tired lines around his eyes, the gray threading through his hair at the temples, the way he held himself like he was carrying weight no one else could see. "So are you." Something passed between them, unspoken but heavy with meaning. Mason looked away first. "I should check on Liam, make sure he's not corrupting your daughter." "Too late. She's definitely the corrupting influence." He laughed, and it sounded genuine, real, like he'd forgotten to be sad for a minute. The party wound down around 9. Parents collected children, said their goodbyes, left in a slow trickle until it was just Elena, Sophie, Mason, young Liam, and Catherine. The kids were asleep on the couch, tangled together like puppies. "I should get Sophie home," Elena said, but she didn't move. "Stay," Catherine suggested. "It's late, the roads are icy, and these two aren't waking up anytime soon. The guest room is still made up from last time." Elena should have said no, should have maintained boundaries, kept some distance. Instead, she said yes, because the truth was, she didn't want to go home to that empty apartment. Didn't want to be alone with her thoughts and her fears and the constant worry that everything would fall apart again. Catherine showed her upstairs, gave her pajamas that had belonged to Sarah, and left her in the guest room with Sophie already tucked into the big bed. Elena changed, crawled in beside her daughter, and lay there staring at the ceiling. A soft knock on the door. "It's Mason. Can I come in?" "Yeah." He opened the door, stayed in the hallway. "Just wanted to make sure you're okay. You got quiet at the end there." "I'm fine. Just tired."
Liar. But his voice was gentle. "What's going on in your head?" Elena sat up, pulled her knees to her chest. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for this to all go away. The job, the apartment, all of it. It feels too good to last." Mason came in, sat on the edge of the bed. "It's not going anywhere. You're doing great at work. You're paying your rent. Sophie's thriving. This is your life now. You're allowed to keep it. What if I'm not good enough? What if I mess up?"
"Then you'll fix it. Same as everyone else." He reached over, took her hand. "You need to stop expecting disaster, Elena. Sometimes good things happen, and they just stay good." "Did they for you?" The question hung in the air. Mason's grip on her hand tightened. "No, but I'm starting to think they might again." Elena looked at their linked hands, at the way his thumb traced absent circles on her wrist. It felt like standing on the edge of something dangerous and necessary. "Mason, I know, this is complicated. You work for my company, I helped you when you had nothing, there's a power imbalance the size of Texas." He met her eyes. "But I can't stop thinking about you. And I don't know what to do with that." Elena's heart hammered. "I don't either." "So what do we do?" "I don't know. Nothing, everything, I don't know." They sat in silence, hands still linked, the weight of possibility pressing down. Sophie stirred in her sleep, and they both pulled back instinctively, as if the moment required witnesses to be real. "I should go," Mason said, but he didn't move. "Probably." "Elena, don't. Not yet." She couldn't handle a confession or a rejection or whatever he was about to say. "Can we just not figure this out right now?" "Yeah, okay." Mason stood, released her hand slowly. "Good night." "Good night." After he left, Elena lay awake for hours, her hand still warm where he'd held it, her mind racing through every possible outcome. She couldn't do this, couldn't risk the stability she'd just found for feelings that might not even be real. Mason was grieving, she was grateful. Probably they were just two lonely people mistaking proximity for connection. But when she finally fell asleep, she dreamed about his hand in hers, and the dream felt like hope. The next morning, Catherine made breakfast while pointedly not mentioning whatever she'd noticed the night before. Mason was quiet, making pancakes for the kids and avoiding Elena's eyes. It should have been awkward. Instead, it felt like a question neither of them knew how to answer. Elena left with Sophie after breakfast, thanking Catherine for the hospitality and the borrowed pajamas. Mason walked them to the car, helped buckle Sophie into her booster seat. "See you Monday?" he said. "Yeah, Monday." He closed the car door, stepped back, and Elena drove away, watching him get smaller in the rearview mirror. Beside her, Sophie chattered about the sleepover, about how much fun she'd had, about whether they could do it again soon. "Maybe," Elena said. "We'll see." But she knew they would. Knew she couldn't stay away from Mason and Catherine and the life they were offering even if she wanted to. Knew that Sophie and young Liam were already too attached to separate easily. Knew that somewhere between Christmas Eve and now, she'd stopped being alone. And that terrified her more than anything else. Because the last time she'd let herself depend on someone, he'd died and left her with nothing. Because Sophie was already calling Catherine grandma and treating young Liam like a brother. Because Mason looked at her like she was something precious, and Elena had forgotten how to be anything but broken. But maybe, broken pieces could fit together into something new, something different from what they'd lost, but good in its own way. She didn't know yet. Couldn't know. All she could do was keep showing up, keep trying, keep letting these people care about her, even though every instinct screamed that it would end badly. Keep hoping that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. 3 months passed in a blur of work deadlines and school pickups and Friday nights at Catherine's that became routine. Elena coordinated events with increasing confidence, earned praise from Marcus and respect from her team, and deposited paychecks that still felt surreal. Sophie thrived at the child care center, made friends, brought home art projects that covered every surface of their small apartment. And Mason was everywhere and nowhere, a constant presence that Elena couldn't escape even when he wasn't in the room. They were careful, professional at the office, friendly at Catherine's, never quite alone long enough for the conversation from that night to resurface. But Elena felt it anyway. The weight of words unsaid, of hands that had touched once and wanted to again, of two people circling something neither of them knew how to name. It was driving her crazy. "You're staring at your phone again," Jennifer said one afternoon in late March, dropping files on Elena's desk. "Waiting for someone to text." "What? No." Elena set the phone down too quickly. "Just checking Sophie's schedule." Jennifer's smile was knowing. For what it's worth, he stares at his phone too, usually right after you leave a meeting. Elena's face burned. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't." Jennifer perched on the desk. "Look, I'm going to give you some unsolicited advice. Mason's a good guy, maybe the best guy I know, and he's been alone for 3 years because he thinks he doesn't deserve to move on. If you're interested, and I think you are, someone's going to have to make the first move, because he won't. It's complicated. Everything worth having is complicated." Jennifer stood. "Just don't wait so long that you both miss out, okay? Life's too short for that." She left Elena staring at the files, heart pounding, mind racing through every reason this was a terrible idea. The power dynamic, the timing, the fact that they were both still grieving people they'd lost, the fact that Sophie was already attached and would be devastated if things went wrong. But Jennifer's words stuck. Life's too short. Marcus had taught her that, dying at 34 with so much left unsaid. Sarah had taught Mason the same thing, leaving him alone with a 7-year-old and regrets he'd never voiced. Maybe waiting for the perfect time was just another way of being afraid. That Friday, Catherine hosted dinner as usual. The kids disappeared immediately to play in the backyard despite the lingering cold. Mason helped his mother-in-law in the kitchen while Elena set the table, and the domesticity of it all felt like playing house, like pretending they were something they weren't, or maybe like practicing for something they could be. "Can I ask you something?" Catherine said during dinner, after the kids had eaten and run off again. "And I want you both to be honest." Mason and Elena exchanged glances across the table. "That sounds ominous," Mason said. "It's not. It's just, I've been watching you two dance around each other for months now, and I'm old enough to say what everyone's thinking.
Catherine set down her wine glass. Are you going to do something about this or just keep suffering in silence?
Catherine, Mason started. Don't Catherine me. I see the way you look at her. I see the way she looks at you. Sarah would want you to be happy, Mason. And Elena, Marcus would want the same for you. So stop using your dead spouses as excuses and figure this out. The bluntness was so unexpected that Elena laughed, a startled, slightly hysterical sound.
Wow, okay, no holding back. Oh, I'm 73 years old. I don't have time for holding back. Catherine looked between them. I'm going to check on the kids. You two are going to sit here and have an actual conversation, and I'm not coming back until you do. She left, and the silence that followed was deafening. Mason spoke first. I'm sorry. She's right, Elena finished. She's right. We've been avoiding this.
Yeah.
Mason pushed his plate away, leaned back in his chair. I don't know how to do this, Elena. I haven't. Sarah was it for me. I thought I'd never want anyone else.
But you do?
Yeah, I do. He met her eyes. I want you. Have wanted you since that night at the hotel when we sat on the floor with the kids, and I realized I was laughing for the first time in years. But I don't know if that's real or if I'm just lonely. Don't know if you feel the same or if you're just grateful I helped you.
Elena took a breath.
I was grateful. At first. You saved us when we had nothing, and I'll never forget that. But somewhere along the way it stopped being gratitude and started being something else. Something that terrifies me. Why does it terrify you? Because I lost Marcus and it destroyed me. Because Sophie lost her father and she's just now starting to feel safe again. Because if this goes wrong, we don't just lose you. We lose Catherine and young Liam and this whole life you've given us. The stakes are too high. Mason leaned forward. And if it goes right? I don't know. I can't imagine that far ahead.
Then don't. Just imagine tomorrow. Imagine next week. Imagine taking this one day at a time and seeing where it goes. He reached across the table, palm up, an invitation. I'm not asking for forever, Elena. I'm just asking for a chance. Elena looked at his hand, work-roughened despite his wealth, steady, despite the tremor in his voice, and thought about all the reasons to say no. Thought about Marcus, about the guilt of moving on, about the risk of Sophie getting hurt. Then she thought about Jennifer's words. Life's too short. She took his hand. Okay, she said quietly. One day at a time. Mason's smile was tentative but real. Yeah? Yeah. But we need ground rules. We keep it slow. We don't tell the kids until we're sure. And if it doesn't work, we figure out how to stay in each other's lives because Sophie and Liam need that stability. Agreed. Anything else? You can't use your money to fix everything. No grand gestures, no expensive gifts. If we're doing this, we're doing it as equals. Mason squeezed her hand. I can work with that. Catherine returned 15 minutes later to find them still holding hands across the table, talking quietly about expectations and fears and what came next. She smiled, said nothing, and started clearing plates with the satisfied air of someone who'd successfully meddled. The kids came in mud-covered and laughing, and Sophie stopped short seeing her mother and Mason holding hands. Are you guys married now? What? No. Elena pulled her hand back. We're friends. Friends hold hands. Sometimes, Mason said, when they like each other a lot. Young Liam considered this. I like Sophie a lot. Should we hold hands? Sure, Sophie said, and grabbed his hand with zero self-consciousness. The adults exchanged glances over their heads, trying not to laugh. Kids made everything simultaneously simpler and more complicated. That night, Mason walked Elena and Sophie to their car. Sophie climbed into her booster seat, already half asleep, while Elena stood by the driver's door. So, Mason said, this is happening. Apparently. Elena felt nervous and excited and terrified in equal measure. What do we do now? I was thinking dinner, just us. Tomorrow night if you can find a sitter. Catherine will watch Sophie. She's been angling for grandparent time. Good. Mason stepped closer, close enough that Elena could feel the warmth radiating off him. I'm going to kiss you goodnight, if that's okay. Elena's heart hammered. Yeah, okay. He kissed her softly, carefully, like she might break. It was nothing like kissing Marcus. Marcus had been all passion and urgency, while Mason was gentle and questioning. but it felt right in its own way, like coming home to a different house that fit just as well. When he pulled back, his eyes were uncertain. Okay? Yeah, more than okay. He smiled, and it transformed his whole face. Good night, Elena. Good night. She drove home in a daze, replaying the kiss, the conversation, the feeling of his hand in hers. In the back seat, Sophie hummed tunelessly, unaware that their lives had just shifted again. At home, Elena tucked her daughter into bed and sat on the edge of the mattress. Sophie, can I ask you something? Uh-huh. How would you feel if Mason and I spent more time together? Just the two of us sometimes? Sophie considered this with the seriousness only a 6-year-old could muster. Like dating? Yeah, like dating. Would he be my new daddy? Elena's throat tightened. No, baby. Nobody's replacing your daddy, but Mason could be someone else who cares about us, if you're okay with that. Sophie was quiet for a long moment, then said, I like Mason. He's nice, and Liam's fun, and Grandma Catherine makes good cookies. So you'd be okay with it? Yeah, but only if he keeps being nice. If he's mean, you have to break up with him. Deal. Elena kissed her forehead. You're pretty smart, you know that? I know, Sophie said matter-of-factly, and rolled over to sleep. The next night, Catherine arrived at 6 with a bag of entertainment supplies and a knowing smile. You look beautiful. Elena looked down at her dress, simple navy, nothing fancy, but the first new clothing she'd bought with her own money in years. It's not too much? It's perfect. Now go. Have fun. Don't worry about Sophie. We're going to have a grand time. Mason picked her up at 6:30, and Elena felt like a teenager on her first date. They went to a small Italian restaurant in Wicker Park, nothing fancy but warm and intimate, and spent 3 hours talking about everything and nothing. He told her about Sarah, how they met in college, how she'd been the brave one, how he still sometimes forgot she was gone. Elena told him about Marcus, the good and the bad, the fights about money, and the laughter in their tiny apartment, the way grief had carved her hollow. Do you think they'd approve? Elena asked over tiramisu they were sharing. Sarah and Marcus. Of this. Mason considered. Sarah would tell me to stop overthinking and just be happy. She was practical that way. Marcus would probably make a terrible joke and then tell me he wanted me to find someone good. He was sentimental under all the bravado. Sounds like they'd get along. Yeah, they would have. Elena set down her fork. Is it weird that I feel guilty anyway? No. I feel it too, like we're betraying them by moving on. Mason reached across the table, took her hand. But I think they'd both tell us we're idiots for waiting this long, that life is for the living, and grief doesn't mean we stop existing. When did you get so wise? Therapy, lots of therapy. He smiled. Catherine made me go after Sarah died. Best money I ever spent, even if I hated every minute. They talked until the restaurant staff started stacking chairs, then walked along the lakefront despite the cold. Mason offered his jacket, and Elena accepted, swimming in it, breathing in the smell of his cologne. They didn't kiss again, not yet, but his arm around her shoulders felt like a promise. I don't want this night to end, Mason said as they reached his car. Me either, but I should get home to Sophie. I know. He opened the passenger door for her. Can I see you again? Outside of work and Catherine's? I'd like that. They drove back to her apartment in comfortable silence, and when he walked her to her door, he kissed her again, longer this time, deeper, with a hint of the urgency they'd both been suppressing. Elena felt herself melting into it, forgetting every reason this was complicated, just feeling wanted and alive and hopeful. Inside, Catherine had Sophie asleep on the couch and a smug expression on her face. Good date? The best, Elena admitted. Thank you for watching her. Anytime. Literally anytime. Catherine gathered her things. He's good for you, you know, and you're good for him. I haven't seen him this happy since before Sarah got sick. After Catherine left, Elena carried Sophie to bed and lay there in the dark, thinking about second chances and the strange ways life could rebuild itself from rubble. She'd come to Chicago with nothing, desperate and broken, and somehow found a job and a home and people who cared. Found Mason, who understood loss in a way most people couldn't. Found Catherine, who'd stepped into the grandmother role like she'd been waiting for it. Found a family that looked nothing like what she'd lost but felt right anyway. The following weeks were a careful dance of new relationship energy and established routine. Mason took Elena on proper dates. Museums, concerts, dinners at restaurants that didn't require checking prices first. Elena made him laugh with stories from work disasters and taught him that not everything could be solved with money or power. They kept it quiet at first, but eventually people noticed. The way Mason found excuses to visit her floor, the way Elena lit up when he entered a room, the way they'd leave Catherine's house together and not return for hours. Jennifer cornered Elena in the break room 6 weeks in. "So, you and Mason?" "Yeah." Elena couldn't stop the smile. "Me and Mason? About damn time. The office pool was getting ridiculous." "There's an office pool?" "Honey, there's always an office pool." Jennifer grinned. "For the record, I won. Told everyone you'd crack by April. Easiest $100 I ever made." Despite the easy settling into routine, there were hard moments too. The first time Mason stayed over and Sophie woke to find him making breakfast in their kitchen. She'd cried for an hour about how it wasn't Daddy. The first time Elena had to cancel plans because Sophie was sick, and Mason seemed too understanding, like he was still just helping the charity case. The night Elena had a panic attack in Mason's car, convinced this was all temporary and would disappear like everything else good in her life. But they worked through it, talked through it. Mason learned when to push and when to give space. Elena learned to accept help without feeling like she owed something in return. Sophie and young Liam became inseparable, treating each other like the siblings neither of them had. Summer came, bringing heat and humidity and the 6-month mark of Elena's employment. Marcus called her into his office on a Friday afternoon, and Elena's stomach dropped, convinced she was being fired despite the stellar performance reviews. Instead, he offered her a promotion. Senior coordinator position just opened up. More responsibility, better pay, your own team. Jennifer and I both think you're ready. Elena stared at the offer letter, at the salary that seemed impossible. "Are you sure? I've only been here 6 months." "And in those 6 months, you've coordinated 15 events without a single major incident, brought in 2 new vendor contracts that saved us 30% on costs, and trained 3 new coordinators. You've earned this, Elena. It has nothing to do with Mason." That last part mattered. Elena had worried constantly that her relationship with Mason would undermine her professional credibility. But Marcus wouldn't lie. He was too blunt for that. "Okay," she said. "Yes. Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just keep doing what you're doing." That night, Mason took her and both kids to celebrate at a nice restaurant downtown. Sophie ordered the most expensive thing on the kids' menu with a confidence that made Elena laugh. Young Liam spilled juice on his shirt within 5 minutes. Mason handled both with the ease of practice, and Elena watched him interact with her daughter, patient, kind, genuinely interested in her rambling story about playground politics, and felt something shift. She loved him. The realization hit like a truck. She loved this man who'd bought her daughter pancakes and rebuilt their lives and learned to share space with her grief without trying to fix it. Loved him in a way that was different from how she'd loved Marcus, but no less real. The thought terrified her. Later, after they dropped the kids at Catherine's for a sleepover, she'd insisted, saying the adults deserved a night alone. Elena and Mason sat in his car outside her apartment. "You got quiet after dinner," Mason said. "What's going on?" "Just thinking." "About?" Elena took a breath. "About how much has changed in 8 months. About how I came here with nothing and now I have everything. About how terrifying it is to be this happy, because I know how fast it can all disappear." Mason turned to face her. "It's not going to disappear. You can't promise that." "You're right. I can't." He took her hand. "Bad things happen. People die. Life falls apart. But that doesn't mean we stop trying. Doesn't mean we refuse to be happy just because happiness might end." "I love you," Elena said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I know it's too soon and probably too complicated, and I'm terrified of saying it, but I do. I love you." Mason's expression softened. "It's not too soon, and I love you too. Have for weeks, but I was afraid you'd think I was moving too fast." "We're both idiots. Clearly." He kissed her, and it felt like sealing a promise. "Move in with me." Elena pulled back. "What?" "Move in with me. You and Sophie. My house is too big. Your apartment is too small, and we're together most nights anyway. The kids already treat each other like siblings. It makes sense." Mason, I know it's fast, I know there are complications, but I'm tired of doing this halfway. I want to wake up with you every morning, want to help Sophie with her homework and argue about whose turn it is to do dishes. Want to build something real with you instead of just dating around the edges of our lives. Elena's mind raced. The practical concerns, her lease, the logistics, what people would think. But underneath all that, a growing certainty that this was right. That the family she'd been trying to rebuild alone could be rebuilt together instead. Okay, she said. Yes, we'll move in. Mason's smile was incandescent. Yeah? Yeah. But we're telling the kids together, and if Sophie has any hesitation, we slow down. Deal. They told the kids the next morning at Catherine's. Sophie's face went through several expressions: surprise, consideration, excitement, before landing on suspicious. Will I have my own room? You and Liam would each have your own rooms, Mason said. Plus there's a playroom and a backyard with a swing set. A swing set? Sophie looked at young Liam. Did you know about the swing set? Yeah, but it's kind of old. We could fix it up, though. The kids went into immediate planning mode, discussing swing set improvements and room arrangements, and whether they'd be allowed to have a dog now. Elena and Mason exchanged glances over their heads. That went well, Catherine said from the kitchen doorway. Though I expect this means fewer Friday dinners here. Never, Mason said. You're stuck with us. Good. I'd hate to have to guilt trip you into visiting. They moved in over the course of 2 weeks, Elena's meager possessions swallowed up by Mason's 3-story house in Lincoln Park. Sophie decorated her new room in shades of purple with Catherine's help, while young Liam showed her every corner of the house like a tour guide. Elena felt like she was playing pretend, living in this mansion with a man she'd known less than a year, but it also felt inevitable, like this was where they'd been headed since that night in the Golden Lantern Diner. The adjustment wasn't seamless. Sophie had nightmares the first week, waking up disoriented and crying for her daddy. Elena had moments of panic, convinced she'd made a terrible mistake moving in so fast. Mason struggled with sharing his space after years of having it to himself. They fought about small things, how to load the dishwasher, bedtime routines, whether the kids needed more structure or more freedom. But they figured it out. Talked through the hard moments instead of letting resentment build. Went to couples therapy at Catherine's strong suggestion, learning to communicate better and navigate blended family dynamics. Slowly, the house started feeling like home instead of Mason's house that Elena was borrowing. 3 months after moving in, Mason sat her down on a Sunday morning while the kids were at Catherine's for brunch. I want to talk about something, and I need you to hear me out before you panic. Elena's stomach dropped. That's not a great opening. I know, but just hear me out. He took her hand. I want to marry you. Mason, I'm not proposing, not yet. I know it's too soon, and we need more time, and Sophie needs to be part of that conversation. But I want you to know that's where I'm headed, that this isn't temporary for me. You and Sophie, you're my family now, and eventually when the time is right, I want to make that official. Elena felt tears sting. I want that too. Eventually, but you're right. We need time. Sophie needs time. I know. That's why I'm not proposing. I'm just stating my intentions, I guess. He smiled, making sure we're on the same page. We are. Same page, same book, same library. They sat there in comfortable silence, the morning sun streaming through the windows, the sounds of the house settling around them. This was what Elena had been searching for without knowing it, not the money or the stability, though those helped, but this feeling of being part of something, of mattering to someone who saw all her broken pieces and chose her anyway. Can I ask you something? Elena said. Do you think Sarah would approve? Of us, I mean. Of you moving on. Mason considered. I think she'd be pissed it took me 3 years. She was always telling me not to waste time on regrets or what-ifs, to live while I was still alive. His voice went soft. She would have liked you, would have appreciated the way you don't take my bullshit, how you fight for Sophie, how you made me remember how to laugh. Marcus would have liked you too, would have given you hell about being rich, but he would have respected how you showed up when we needed someone. Think they're watching from somewhere? Judging our life choices? I hope not. That would be awkward. They both laughed, and it felt like permission, from Sarah, from Marcus, from themselves, to keep building this new life without apologizing for moving forward. The proposal came 6 months later on a snowy evening in December. Mason had taken everyone back to the Golden Lantern Diner, the place where it all started, for what he claimed was just an anniversary dinner. The kids were in on it, barely containing their excitement, while Elena remained oblivious until Mason slid out of the booth and got down on one knee. "You changed my life in this diner exactly 1 year ago," he said, pulling out a ring. "Let me spend the rest of my life changing yours. Marry me, Elena. Let me be Sophie's dad officially. Let's make this family permanent." Elena was crying too hard to speak, but she managed to nod. Sophie launched herself at Mason with a shriek of joy, and young Liam joined in, and suddenly they were all tangled together in the middle of the diner while other customers applauded, and Doris, still working after all this time, brought out a cake she'd apparently prepared in advance. They married in the spring in Catherine's backyard, surrounded by close friends and family. Jennifer was Elena's maid of honor. Young Liam was Mason's best man. Sophie was the flower girl, wearing purple because she'd insisted, scattering petals with more enthusiasm than accuracy. But the moment that broke everyone was when Mason knelt in front of Sophie during the ceremony, before he'd even kissed Elena, and asked, "Sophie Marie Hart, would you let me be your dad? Not to replace the father you had, but to be someone else who loves you and wants to protect you and help you grow up?" Sophie nodded, tears streaming down her 6-year-old face, and threw her arms around his neck. Yes, I want you to be my dad." There wasn't a dry eye in the backyard. The reception was simple: catered food, a playlist instead of a DJ, decorations that Catherine had insisted on making herself. But it was perfect. Elena danced with Mason, with Sophie, with Catherine, feeling lighter than she had in years. This was her family now, the one she'd chosen and the one that had chosen her back. Late in the evening, after the kids had crashed in Catherine's living room and the last guests had left, Elena and Mason sat on the porch swing, watching fireflies blink in the darkness. "A year ago, I was alone in a diner on Christmas Eve," Mason said, "feeling sorry for myself, convinced I'd never be happy again. A year ago, I was counting change for pancakes and trying to figure out where we'd sleep." Elena leaned into his shoulder. "Funny how fast things can change. Funny how the worst night can lead to the best thing." They sat in comfortable silence, the swing creaking gently, the sounds of the city distant and soft. Inside, their children slept peacefully. Around them, their family, chosen and earned, celebrated what they'd built from the wreckage of what they'd lost. Elena thought about Marcus sometimes still, in quiet moments. Wondered what he'd think of this life, of Mason, of Sophie calling another man dad. But she thought he'd understand. That grief didn't mean you stopped living. That loving someone new didn't erase the person you'd lost. That sometimes the greatest gift you could give to the dead was to keep going, keep trying, keep opening your heart even when it had been shattered. Mason still talked to Sarah sometimes too, she knew. Still wore his original wedding band on a chain around his neck. Still had her picture in his office. Elena had learned that moving on didn't mean forgetting. It just meant making room for new memories alongside the old ones. "What are you thinking about?" Mason asked. "About how far we've come. About how scared I was that night at the hotel. About how grateful I am that you didn't give up on us. I could say the same thing. You could have refused my help, could have walked away 100 times. Where would I have walked to?" Elena smiled. "You were offering everything I needed: safety, stability, hope. I was terrified of it, but I would have been an idiot to refuse. Still, you trusted me when you had no reason to. That took courage." They fell silent again, watching the fireflies, feeling the weight of the year settling over them. In the morning, they'd fly to Hawaii for their honeymoon, while Catherine watched both kids. Next week, they'd come home to their house, their family, their normal, chaotic life. Next month, Elena would lead her first major corporate retreat as senior coordinator. Next year, who knew what would come? But tonight, they sat together in the darkness, two people who'd lost everything and found each other in the wreckage. Two people who'd learned that family wasn't just what you were born into. It was what you built, piece by piece, from love and patience and the willingness to keep trying even when everything hurt. Elena thought about that moment in the diner, watching Mason pay for their meal without wanting credit. Thought about how a simple act of kindness had changed the trajectory of 2 lives. No, 4 lives. How $40 in a hotel room and a willingness to see someone who was suffering had created this. It hadn't been perfect. There'd been fights and setbacks, and moments when Elena was convinced it would all fall apart. Moments when Mason's grief overwhelmed him and he shut down. Moments when Sophie acted out, testing boundaries, making sure Mason wouldn't leave like Daddy had. Moments when the differences in their backgrounds created friction, Elena's instinct to save every penny clashing with Mason's casual spending, or her need for independence bumping against his desire to fix everything. But they'd worked through it, all of it, because they'd both learned the hard way that life was too short and too fragile to waste on pride or fear or the belief that you had to do everything alone. "I love you," Elena said into the darkness. "I love you too." Mason kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for taking a chance on me. Thank you for buying us pancakes." They laughed together, the sound carrying across the backyard where they'd just gotten married, where their children slept inside, where their life together was just beginning. And in the end, maybe that was the point. That kindness mattered. That showing up for someone in their darkest moment could change everything. That the family you built was just as real as the family you lost. That second chances were possible if you were brave enough to reach for them. That love, in all its messy, complicated, imperfect forms, was always worth the risk. Mason and Elena would return to that diner every Christmas Eve for the rest of their lives, bringing Sophie and young Liam, and eventually the daughter they'd have together 2 years later. They'd sit in the same booth where Mason had first noticed Elena counting change, and they'd remember. They'd leave massive tips for Doris, who'd somehow never aged a day. They'd tell their kids the story of how they met, editing out the darker parts until they were old enough to understand. And every time, Elena would look across the table at the man who'd seen her at her lowest and chosen to help instead of look away. The man who'd become her husband, her partner, Sophie's father, the anchor that kept her steady when grief tried to pull her under. Every time, Mason would look back at the woman who'd reminded him how to feel, how to live, how to build something new from the ruins of what he'd lost. Every time, they'd hold hands across the table and silently thank whatever force of luck or fate or simple human decency had brought them together on that frozen Christmas Eve. Because sometimes, when you're at the end of your rope and the world feels impossibly dark, someone shows up with kindness, with pancakes and hotel rooms and job interviews and patience, with the willingness to see you as more than your circumstances, with the understanding that everyone's fighting battles others can't see. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, that kindness becomes love, and that love becomes family, and that family becomes home. Not perfect, never perfect, but real and messy and beautiful in all the ways that matter. That was the gift Mason gave Elena that Christmas Eve. Not money or shelter, or even the job that followed, but hope. The belief that good things could still happen, that she deserved more than just survival, that her daughter deserved more than just getting by. And the gift Elena gave Mason in return was purpose, a reason to wake up feeling something other than grief. A reminder that his wealth and power meant nothing if he didn't use them to make someone's life better. A family to build with instead of a loss to mourn alone. They saved each other, these two broken people, not in some grand dramatic gesture, but in the quiet accumulation of small moments. Shared meals and school pickups and fights about whose turn it was to do dishes. Inside jokes and late-night conversations and learning each other's grief triggers. Building trust one day at a time until the foundation was solid enough to hold the weight of forever. That was what love looked like after loss. Not the passionate whirlwind of first love, but the steady accumulation of choosing each other again and again. Of showing up even when it was hard. Of making room for grief and joy to coexist. Of understanding that moving forward didn't mean leaving anyone behind. Years later, when people asked how they met, Mason and Elena would smile and say they'd met in a diner on Christmas Eve. They'd leave out the desperation and the homelessness and the fear. They'd skip over the part where Elena almost said no to the hotel room, where Mason almost walked past without stopping, where everything hung on a moment of choice that could have gone either way. But they'd never forget it. Would never forget how fragile that moment was, how easily it could have been different. And they'd never stop being grateful that on one frozen night in Chicago, two strangers chose kindness, chose to see each other, chose to take a chance on something that felt impossible, and built a family from it. That was the story they told their children on Christmas Eve, sitting in that same worn booth at the Golden Lantern Diner. watching snow fall outside the window just like it had that first night. That was the legacy they hoped to leave. Not wealth or success or any grand achievement, but the simple truth that kindness matters. That seeing someone else's pain and choosing to help can change everything. That family is what you make it, not what you're born into. That even in your darkest moment, when you've lost everything and can't see a way forward, someone might show up with pancakes and hope. And that might be enough. It was enough for them. More than enough. It was everything.